Well, hey, all you wiretappers out there. This is Gary Jenkins, as a lot of you know, retired Kansas City Police Intelligence Unit detective and now podcast host and producer and all that. And I was contacted by my guest I had on recently, who was only known as Matt. He's the guy who supplied all the information to the author of Brantley Scarborough, who wrote Made in Long Island. That was just out a couple of weeks ago. Now, I've never met Scarborough, and I don't know any more about him, and I've never met Matt in person. I've had some emails and some Zoom calls with Matt, but I've never actually seen him either. But I recognize his accent, and he does come from the Long Island, New York area. And he does have some interesting stories about growing up with younger mobsters and the Bonanno and Gambino families and doing the fireworks business with Gotti and some of the other the horse racing fixing business and that kind of thing. But he made quite a claim that the accepted suspects in the hit on the Bonanno wannabe boss Carmine the cigar Galante was not who the government claims it is. And the government only claims one guy, and that's Bruno or Anthony Bruno Indelicato. He claims it was some young guys who had a grudge against Galante, and they heard that this hit was approved by the commission, and they jumped in there and did it before Joe Massino got his crew set and were all ready to go and carry out this approved hit. Now, there's no dispute that the commission approved this hit, I don't think. There may be some disagreement about who actually carried it out. I think there's no doubt that the two Zips who were bodyguards, Cesare Bonaventre and Baldasario Amato, did not resist the hit. They didn't. They took no action and just walked out and left. And then were interviewed by the government later on. Of course, wouldn't say anything. They probably knew he was scheduled to be hit. They knew this was coming. And both were promoted in the Bonanno family right after. So that tells you something. Now, in the commission trial, that's where Anthony Delicato got convicted for the hit on Carmine Galante. And in the commission trial, the government did convict Tony Salerno, boss of the Genovese family, Anthony Tony Dux Corallo, boss of the Lucchese family, Gennaro Jerry Lang Langella, the Colombo family acting boss and regular underboss, Salvatore Tom Mick Santoro, who was a Lucchese family underboss, Christopher Christy Tick Funari, Lucchese family consigliere, Little Ralphie Scopo, the Colombo family soldier, Carmine Junior Persico, who was the boss of the Colombo crime family at that time, Stefano Canone, Bonanno family consigliere, Anthony Bruno Dendelicato, a Bonanno family capo. Paul Castellano and Mr. Neil Della Croce, were not in the trial because they died. They were charged, but they died just before the trial. Now, on the YouTube show we did, we got a lot of comments, and Matt's got a lot of questions, and he wants to address and clarify why he doesn't believe that the government's claim that Anthony Indelicato and two unknown men killed Galante. So I said, I don't know what to tell you. I said, record and clarify your claim and see if you can address any of these questions that people have had in the comments section. Now, this may end up like all the competing theories on Jimmy Hoffa's death and where his body might be. I don't know. But at least Frank Sheeran, the Irishman, did not claim the Galante hit as best I can remember. So anyhow, here's Matt's story.
I just want to say thank you so much for the interest we've generated from Gary's Gangland podcast. A lot of learning goes on here, and that's where I'm going to start off. One item keeps coming up, and believe me, I'm not being the slightest bit condescending. If you don't, study this stuff and look at it, you have no way of knowing this. If you were to punch in right now, because we've done it, like Google searches, what evidence was used against Bruno Indelicato? Well, one thing that comes up, and a couple people referenced in the emails and on the posts, was ballistics. They had ballistic evidence against Bruno Indelicato. Boy, that's pretty strong. I mean, ballistic evidence is very, very strong. So let's go through the ballistic evidence. Let me start off by saying there's none. What you're reading on that, and if you read the fine print closely and go back to the source, that is AI-generated garbage. That's why we don't like AI. The definition of ballistic evidence would be something like this. We pulled a slug out of a wall. We pulled a slug out of a victim. We locked the guy up. The guy had that gun on him. We matched that slug to that gun. That is ballistic evidence. There was absolutely none of that presented against Bruno and Delicato, despite what AI says. Again, if you take away one thing, please take away the fact that don't ever use AI as a source. Now, I know one other thing people asked about was the progression on all this. And again, the book details it with so many stories, so many different John Gotti stories in there that people never heard about. But here's a brief summary of the progression. Our friends were young. We were crazy. We dealt fireworks. We dealt so much, they had to bring in the boss. The boss at that time for that area was John Gotti. To us, it was the same as John Smith. We never heard of the guy. He was great to us. We sold a ton of fireworks. He gave us more and more locations, more and more responsibility. Our friends made a fortune. One of our friends, we thought, had a car accident. Two of the bodyguards who helped our friends kill Galante, Baldo and Cesare, they approached us at a wake and said, look, your friend was not the victim of an accident. Your friend was the victim of a homicide authorized by Galante. We verified there was bullet holes in his car from the impound yard, from the police sources we had, kept it under wraps for 2 years. At one of the card games, Angelo got word to our friend Tommy that the commission, in fact, did authorize a hit on Galante. The hit was to be done conjunctively with the Gambinos and the Bananos. Our friend Tommy jumped the gate. He said, we're going to avenge our friend's death, put together the team that did it. The details are shocking about what our team did to get the hit done. I mean, details you're shocked about an alibi, jumping off of a boat to create an alibi. I want people to read about this. Having police sources helping the hit, including holding the spaces on July 12th when the hit went down, holding 2 different parking spaces at that location. I hope this helps people. Now, I want to get back to another one that keeps coming up. People keep saying, oh, well, they're on tape celebrating. People, please, we've made some videos on this at YouTube. Go look at them. You can pull them up. They're online. You can find them. There's a bunch of sources that have them. Watch the raw video. That is not a celebration. That is a beef being put in. Sonny Red in Delicato is furious. He's going at it with his consigliere, Stefano Canone, Stevie Beefs, and you can see in his face, you can see his body language and mannerisms. He walks away from him and then he rushes back quickly and goes to his face. That is not a celebration. That's anger. Stefano Canone actually points in back of him, pointing at the Ravenite. And he's basically telling him, look, we've registered the beef. Neil is inside. Neil is trying to decipher all of this also, because again, the whole conflict was this. The commission ordered this hit. People say, oh, they approved it. They ordered it. I'm telling you, the commission are the ones who ordered the hit. They gave the work to Joe Messino, who was going to oversee the job. However, the commission specified that it had to be done jointly between the Gambino family and the Bonanno family. Sonny Red and Delicato was furious that he was left out of the hit. Simultaneously, John Gotti over in Ozone Park, Queens, was furious that he was let out of the hit. You just have to understand, in Cosa Nostra, you do not go out and celebrate a hit after it's done. You don't even show your face. Everything in a hit like this is meticulously planned and organized. You know exactly where the getaway cars are going to go and who's going to chop them up. There is no shot in the world that an expert like Sonny Red is going to leave a getaway car from a triple homicide out in the middle of the street. That does not happen. Let me tell you something. That's called botching a hit, both of those acts. If you botch a hit in Cosa Nostra, you're the next one on the other end of the next hit. You're going to get hit. There's plenty of cases where people screwed up hits and didn't dispose of vehicles properly, and they're the next ones to get hit. So anyone who thinks it's a celebration and thinks that that's Cosa Nostra protocol to go out and celebrate is sadly mistaken. That's why right away the FBI and Cosa Nostra members knew. Obviously, Sonny Red and Delicato, his brother JB, Phil Lucky, Bruno and Delicato, all those guys had nothing to do with the hit. If they did, they would have been buried in a safe house. They would not be out in front of what we call the FBI screen test at Mr. Neal's Club, the Ravenite in Manhattan. Now, people also say another phrase or two that I really love, the smell test. Okay, the smell test. Let's talk about that. You had 2 trials going on simultaneously in 1985. Same building, Brooklyn, Pizza Connection case and the commission case. The FBI had been broken down into 5 different squads, one for each family. You know them all, Colombo, Gambino, Lucchese, Genovese, and of course the Bonanno. Now, the Bonanno section of the FBI, the Bonanno squad, had the most to do in these cases. Most, if not all, the pizza connection focused on the Bonannos, and a good chunk, especially 100% of the Galante hit, focused on the Bonannos, and that was in the commission case. These guys talk to each other. They live, eat, and breathe with each other. So if you want to talk about a smell test, can somebody tell me why in Richard Martin, he was the prosecutor, by the way, in the pizza connection case, they absolutely refused to say who killed Galante in that case. They came out and said in the indictment and in testimony, 3 unknown males killed Galante. Now, people talk about it's easy to see. Bruno and Delicato did it. So you want to tell me that 5 and 6 years after the hit, FBI agents that were on the Bonanno squad, they couldn't come out and say Bruno and Delicato did it. Why? Because they knew he didn't. They didn't want to get a perjury rap. Richard Martin didn't want to blow his case by telling nonsense that Bruno and Delicato did it. If it was common knowledge that Bruno and Delicato did it, and if there was a legitimate shred of evidence that Bruno and Delicato did the work, the pizza connection case would have also said Bruno and Delicato is one of the shooters. It did not. That's what doesn't pass the smell test. But they even went to an appellate court to throw out any testimony about Galante's murder in the pizza connection case. And sure enough, the judge agreed and said, yeah, we're not putting one stitch of Galante's murder in the pizza connection case. Now, had those FBI agents in the Bonanno squad had presented legitimate evidence against Bruno and Delicato in the pizza connection case, be it ballistic, be it anything, the judge wouldn't have done that, but he did. Read the transcripts of the case we have. There was nothing like that presented against Bruno in that case. And again, that's why the FBI in the pizza connection case kept saying, we have no idea who killed Carmine Galante. That is critical for people to understand. And last note I want to get on that people wondering about the Joe Mazzina angle. Yes, Joe Mazzina, when he flipped right after his conviction, he gave up murders all the way back from 1969. Now, Joe Mazzina had a motivation. If he left out any crime or any detail and failed to disclose anything, they throw him out of the program. They did the same to Gas Pipe Queso. They threw him out of the program. So Joe Mazzina, of course, is going to tell the feds every single thing he knew about the Bonanno family's involvement with the Galante hit. Joe Mazzino, did come out and say, yes, he got the order and he informed Rusty about the hit. But notice that's when the trail stops. Joe Mazzino, who was a hands-on guy, never came back and said, hey, Sonny Red did the hit with his kid Bruno and his brother JB. He gave them no details. Why? Because he didn't have details. Thank you so much again for all of your questions and comments.
So, guys, that's Matt's reasoning, and that's his story. The government did not charge or convict any of the others for this murder, any other people for this murder in that commission trial. Now, those guys who were convicted for racketeering under RICO. And the murder of Galante was not a racketeering. That was a criminal predicate offense that proved that there was an organization known as a commission. It existed, and they ordered criminal acts. And this was a criminal act that they ordered. They need a predicate act where they've ordered criminal acts. And the Galante hit was one of them. The murder's, the best one to throw out there. And I think they convicted him based on his palm print on the getaway car that they found. They never claimed during the trial to know the other two hitmen. So I'll leave it up to you guys to argue this out in the comments section on my YouTube shows with Matt or on this one here. And he'll be monitoring those and come back with any questions that you have. So thanks, Matt, for this interesting look at young associates of Gotti and the fireworks business and the horse race fixing business and your theory based on information from your friends in the younger element of the New York mob. And you were kind of on the periphery of that yourself. And the people that you talked to that were really basically were involved in this hit and the setup. I thought it was really slick using cops to block out parking spots and then to pull out if it was all good to go and leave the area. So that's didn't have Ring cameras and all the cameras back then. So we're going to never know how much all that's true, but it's history is kind of an agreed upon set of facts or lies or whatever, because eventually we agree upon it and that becomes the history. And this is some of the history of the New York mob in the 70s to the 80s and the murder of Lilo or Carmine the Cigar Galante. Thanks, guys, so much for tuning in. And don't forget to hit on YouTube, like and subscribe. Post this on your own social media pages and let other people know about the show. We like to get a lot of people watching or listening and watching to the show, and watching.